Hello everyone, and welcome to English Debate Practice. I'm Alex.
And I'm Maya. Today we're going to debate 9 different topics.
These are real topics that people argue about every day. We will give you both sides.
Alex will argue for each topic, and I will argue against it.
Our goal is to help you improve your English listening and also to help you think about important issues.
The language we use is B1 level, so it is clear and not too difficult. But the ideas are interesting and real.
Let's get started with our first topic. The question is, should social media be banned for children under 13?
This is a very important question today. Millions of children use social media every day. So what do you think, Alex?
I think social media should be banned for children under 13. Here is why. Children are still developing. Their brains are not ready for social media. When children use social media, they compare themselves to others. They see perfect photos and perfect lives. And they feel bad about themselves. Studies show that children who use social media a lot feel more anxious and more depressed. This is a serious problem. We need to protect children.
I understand your concern, Alex, but I disagree. Banning social media for children under 13 is not the right answer. First of all, children are going to find ways to use it anyway. If we ban it, they will just lie about their age. The ban will not work. Instead, we should teach children how to use social media safely. Parents and teachers should guide them. Education is better than banning.
But Maya, education takes time. Right now, children are being hurt by social media. We cannot wait. Some social media companies even design their apps to be addictive. They want children to spend more and more time on their phones. That is not fair to children. A ban sends a clear message that we will protect children from harmful technology.
I hear you, Alex. But think about the positive side of social media too. Children can connect with friends and family. They can learn new things. They can find communities where they feel accepted. For some children, especially those who feel lonely or different, social media is very important. Taking it away completely could hurt them.
That is a fair point. But there are safer ways to connect. Children can use messaging apps just to talk to friends and family. That is very different from public social media where anyone can see what you post. The pressure to get likes and followers is very harmful. I still believe a ban is necessary for children under 13.
And I still believe that education and parental guidance are better solutions than a ban. But I think we agree that children need protection. We just disagree on how to do it.
Let me add one more point before we move on. I want to talk about the mental health side of this. Research from universities in the UK and the US shows a very clear link. Girls who use social media a lot are significantly more likely to feel depressed and anxious than girls who use it less. And this is not just one study. It is many studies over many years. That data is hard to ignore.
I have seen that research too. And I take it seriously. But I want to point out something important. The research shows a link, but it does not always show that social media causes the depression. It might be that children who are already feeling sad spend more time on social media. The relationship goes both ways.
That is a fair scientific point. Correlation is not always causation. But even if social media is not the only cause, many researchers believe it makes things worse. And for that reason alone, I think we should limit access for young children.
Okay, I think we can agree that social media companies need to take more responsibility. They should design their platforms to be less addictive for young users. They should show fewer harmful comparisons. They should have better systems to protect children from bullying online.
I fully agree with that. Better design and better regulation of social media companies is essential. And until those changes happen, I still think a minimum age limit makes sense.
A minimum age is already in place in many countries. The question is whether 13 is the right age or whether it should be higher. Some experts say 16 would be more appropriate.
That is a conversation worth having. The key point is that we must take children's mental health seriously. Social media is a powerful tool. And powerful tools need careful rules.
Agreed. And parents play a critical role too. They should talk to their children regularly about what they see online. They should create a safe space where children can ask questions and share worries without judgment.
Exactly. This is a problem that requires action from many directions. From governments, from companies, from schools, and from families. No single solution is enough. Okay, I think we are ready to move on. Let's go to our second topic. Should animals be kept in zoos?
This is another topic that many people feel strongly about. I know you support zoos, Alex. Tell us why.
Yes, I think zoos serve an important purpose. First, zoos help protect endangered species. Many animals would be extinct today without zoos. Zoos breed animals and help increase their populations. Second, zoos educate the public. When people see real animals, they care more about protecting them. Children who visit zoos are more likely to become adults who care about the environment. Third, modern zoos are not like the old zoos. They give animals large, comfortable spaces that feel natural.
I strongly disagree with keeping animals in zoos. Animals belong in the wild. A zoo, no matter how big or nice it looks, is still a prison for an animal. Animals in zoos often show signs of stress. They walk in circles. They act in strange ways. This is called zoochotic behavior, and it shows that the animals are not happy. No animal should live its whole life in a cage for humans to look at.
But Maya, for many endangered animals, the wild is no longer safe. Humans have destroyed their habitats. If we release all zoo animals into the wild, many of them will die. Zoos give them a safe place to live and reproduce. And many zoos have programs to release animals back into the wild when it is safe to do so.
I agree that habitat destruction is a serious problem. But the solution is not zoos. The solution is to protect and restore natural habitats. We should spend money on protecting wild areas, not on building more zoos. And for animals that truly cannot survive in the wild, there are sanctuaries. Sanctuaries are large, natural spaces where animals can live freely without being on display.
Sanctuaries are great, but they are expensive and can only hold a small number of animals. Zoos reach millions of visitors every year. That education and that connection to nature is very valuable. I believe well-managed zoos do more good than harm.
And I believe that animals have a right to live freely. We should find ways to protect them that do not involve locking them up. Both of us care about animals. We just have different ideas about how to help them.
Maya, let me ask you something. What do you think about zoo conservation programs? Many zoos fund research on wild animal populations. They send scientists into the field to study and protect animals in their natural habitats. Is that not valuable?
Yes, that kind of work is definitely valuable. But here is my question. Do those conservation programs actually require keeping animals in cages for visitors to see? Could zoos fund the same research without displaying animals? I think they could.
That is an interesting idea. A zoo that does conservation research but does not display animals. That is essentially what a wildlife research center is. But then you lose the public engagement. The millions of people who come to zoos every year and feel inspired by seeing real animals. That inspiration is what drives donations and political support for conservation.
You make a good argument for the educational side of zoos. I think the best solution is a middle ground. Zoos should continue to exist but should change significantly. They should focus much more on education and conservation. They should give animals much larger, more natural spaces. And they should have a clear plan to eventually release as many animals as possible back into protected wild areas.
That is a vision I can support. A zoo of the future that is more like a protected wildlife area that people can visit responsibly. Less like a traditional zoo where animals are on display in small enclosures.
Exactly. We want people to connect with nature. But we want the animals to live well, too. Those two goals do not have to be in conflict.
Beautifully said. Alright, let's continue to our third topic. Should people work only 4 days a week instead of 5?
Oh, this is a topic that many workers are very interested in. Alex, you support the 4-day work week. Make your case.
Absolutely. I think the 4-day work week is a great idea. Research shows that when people work 4 days a week, they are actually more productive. They have more energy. They focus better. They make fewer mistakes. Countries like Iceland have tested the 4-day workweek, and the results were very positive. Workers were happier and did just as much work in 4 days as they did in 5.
That sounds nice in theory, Alex. But in practice, it is not so simple. Many jobs cannot be done in 4 days. Think about hospitals, restaurants, stores, and emergency services. These businesses need to stay open 7 days a week. If everyone works 4 days, who covers the extra day? Also, if workers produce the same amount in 4 days, companies might just expect more work in those 4 days. It could become more stressful, not less.
Those are good points. But the 4-day workweek does not mean working the same hours in 4 days. It means working fewer total hours. Research shows that many people waste a lot of time at work. Long meetings, unnecessary emails, and slow decision-making. When you have one fewer day, people focus more and waste less time. And for essential services, companies can schedule workers in shifts to cover all 7 days.
I see your point about productivity. But I worry about the economic side. If workers work fewer hours, will they earn less money? Many families cannot afford to earn less. And small businesses might not be able to afford to pay the same salaries for fewer hours. The 4-day work week might work well for large, wealthy companies, but it could hurt small businesses and lower-income workers.
That is a valid concern. I think the government and companies need to work together to make this transition fair. Some companies could keep salaries the same and just reduce hours. Others might need support. But I believe the benefits of a 4-day workweek, including better mental health, more time for family, and higher job satisfaction, are worth working toward.
I agree that work-life balance is very important. But I think flexible working hours might be a better solution than a 4-day work week for everyone. Let people choose when and how they work. That way, both workers and businesses can find what works best for them.
Flexibility is good. But a structured 4-day week gives everyone the same benefit. Not just people who are lucky enough to have flexible employers. This is an issue of fairness.
I want to push back on one thing. You said the 4-day work week is about fairness. But what about workers in service industries? A factory worker, a nurse, a bus driver cannot simply compress their work into fewer days. Their jobs require them to be physically present for a set number of hours. So the 4-day work week is really only possible for certain types of jobs. It might actually increase inequality between office workers and manual workers.
That is a really important point, and I am glad you raised it. You are right that not all jobs can switch to a 4-day week in the same way. But there are creative solutions. For example, a hospital could have some staff working 4 longer days and other staff filling in on the 5th day. Rotating schedules can work. The point is that we need to find solutions for all types of workers, not just office workers.
I like that you are thinking about all workers. But implementing rotating schedules for everyone is a massive organizational challenge. It requires a lot of planning and coordination. Many employers, especially small businesses, simply do not have the resources to redesign their entire schedule.
Change is always challenging. But consider the cost of not changing. Burnout is a massive problem. People are leaving their jobs at record rates because they are exhausted. The cost of replacing workers who burn out is enormous for businesses. Investing in a 4-day week could actually save companies money in the long run by reducing turnover in sick days.
That is a compelling economic argument. I think pilot programs are the best way forward. Companies that want to try the 4-day week should do so, measure the results carefully, and share what they learn. Evidence-based decisions are always better than sudden, sweeping changes.
I completely agree with that. Let the evidence guide us. And based on the evidence we have so far, I am optimistic about the 4-day workweek.
An interesting debate. Let's move to topic 4. Should students be required to wear school uniforms?
Yes, I believe school uniforms are a good idea. Here is my main reason. School uniforms reduce inequality. When all students wear the same clothes, you cannot tell who is rich and who is poor. This reduces bullying based on clothing. Students do not feel pressure to wear expensive brands or the latest fashion. They can focus on learning instead of worrying about what to wear.
I disagree strongly. School uniforms take away students' freedom of expression. Clothing is one of the ways young people show who they are. When you force everyone to dress the same, you are telling students that being different is not okay. That is a harmful message. Education should encourage creativity and individuality, not force everyone to look the same.
I understand that point, Maya. But there are many other ways for students to express themselves. Through art, music, sports, writing, and friendships. Clothing is just one small part of identity. And the benefits of uniforms are real. Schools that use uniforms often report better behavior and a stronger sense of community.
But Alex, those reports are not always clear. Some studies show that uniforms do not actually improve behavior or academic performance. And uniforms can be expensive for families. A family might need to buy special school clothes and regular clothes for weekends and holidays. That costs more money, not less. Uniforms are not always the cheap solution people think they are.
That is true for some families. But many schools offer support for families who cannot afford uniforms. And having one set of school clothes actually simplifies life for many families. You do not have to think about what to wear every morning. It saves time and reduces stress.
I still think students should have the freedom to express themselves through clothing. But I do agree that bullying based on clothes is a real problem. Schools should address that through education about respect and tolerance, not by making everyone dress the same.
Can I raise one more point about uniforms? In some countries, particularly in parts of Asia and Africa, school uniforms are actually seen as a symbol of pride. Students wear their uniforms with honor. It shows they belong to a school and have access to education. In that context, uniforms take on a very positive meaning.
That is a great cultural point. You are right that context matters enormously. A school uniform in a country where access to education is limited carries a very different meaning than a uniform in a wealthy country where every child already goes to school. We should not assume that what works in one culture will work the same way everywhere.
Absolutely. And I think that is a lesson for many education debates. What works in one country may not work in another. Education policy needs to be sensitive to local culture, local needs, and local resources.
Well said. And I think both of us agree that creating a positive, inclusive school environment is the real goal. Whether uniforms help or hurt that goal depends on the specific school and community.
Exactly. The means may differ, but the goal is the same. Safe, supportive, and equal learning environments for all children. Okay, topic 5 is an important one for many cities. Should cars be banned from city centers? Should cars be banned from city centers?
This is a question that more and more cities are thinking about. Alex, you support banning cars from city centers. Tell us why.
I support this idea because cars create many problems in cities. First, cars cause serious air pollution. In many cities, the air quality is very poor because of car exhaust. This causes health problems for people who live there. Second, cars cause traffic jams. People waste hours sitting in traffic every day. This is bad for the economy and for people's mental health. Third, streets full of cars are dangerous for pedestrians and cyclists. If we remove cars from city centers, cities become safer and more pleasant for everyone.
I understand those concerns, Alex. But banning cars from city centers would create serious problems. Many people rely on their cars to get to work, to go shopping, and to take their children to school. Not everyone lives near public transportation. If you ban cars, you are hurting people who cannot easily use buses or trains. Also, businesses in city centers might lose customers who drive there to shop.
But Maya, when cities have banned cars or reduced car traffic, the results have often been very positive. In cities like Oslo, Amsterdam, and Barcelona, removing cars from certain areas actually helped local businesses. More people walk and cycle, and they tend to stop and shop more than people driving past. And when fewer people drive, cities can invest more in public transportation, which benefits everyone.
That works in some cities, but not all cities are the same. Cities in Europe are different from cities in the United States or other parts of the world. In many American cities, public transportation is very limited. If you ban cars there without first building good public transportation, you create real hardship for many people. The ban must come after good public transportation is in place, not before.
I completely agree that public transportation must come first. That is exactly why cities need to start investing in it now. And we can start by banning cars from just a few central streets. We do not have to ban them everywhere at once. A gradual approach can work very well.
A gradual approach makes more sense to me. I support reducing car traffic in cities over time, as public transportation improves. But a sudden, complete ban would cause too many problems.
Good. We found some common ground there. Moving on, topic 6. Should fast food restaurants be taxed more heavily?
Alex, you think fast food should be taxed more. Explain your reasoning.
Yes, I believe fast food should have higher taxes. Fast food is a major cause of obesity and other health problems. When people eat too much fast food, they get sick more often. This costs governments and health systems a lot of money. If we tax fast food, the price goes up. People will buy it less often. And the money from the tax can be used to pay for health programs and to support healthier food options.
But Alex, who eats the most fast food? Lower income people. Fast food is cheap and quick. People who work long hours and have limited money often rely on fast food because they do not have time or money to cook healthy meals. If you tax fast food, you are taking more money from the people who can least afford it. That is not fair.
That is a very important point, Maya. That is why any fast food tax must be part of a bigger plan. The money raised must be used to make healthy food more affordable. We should subsidize fresh fruits and vegetables so they are cheaper than fast food. And we should invest in nutrition education.
I like the idea of making healthy food cheaper. But I think that should be the main strategy, not taxing fast food. Instead of punishing people for buying fast food, we should make it easier for everyone to access good food. Build more grocery stores in poor neighborhoods. Create more community gardens. Help people learn to cook.
Those are all wonderful ideas. But they take a long time. A tax creates an immediate signal. And many countries have shown that small taxes on unhealthy food do change behavior. Mexico taxed sugary drinks, and people bought fewer of them. The tax worked.
Mexico is one example. But in other places, the results have been mixed. And if we tax fast food but not other unhealthy foods, the tax is not consistent. Why is a fast food burger more taxable than an unhealthy frozen meal from a grocery store? The line is difficult to draw.
These are difficult questions. I still believe a carefully designed tax is part of the solution. But I agree that making healthy food affordable is equally important.
Can we talk about the fast food industry itself for a moment? Because I think fast food companies have a responsibility here too. They should offer healthier options. They should reduce the amount of salt and sugar in their food. And they should stop advertising unhealthy food to children.
I absolutely agree. Fast food companies have enormous power. They spend billions of dollars every year on advertising. And much of that advertising is targeted at children, who are not able to make fully informed choices about what is healthy. That is not right.
Some countries have already banned advertising of unhealthy food to children before a certain time in the evening. That kind of regulation has shown positive results. Children request fewer unhealthy foods when they see fewer advertisements for them.
That is a great example of a targeted intervention that works. It does not stop adults from buying fast food. But it protects children from being targeted by marketing. I think that kind of smart regulation can be very effective.
And fast food companies can also reformulate their products. Many companies have done this already. They have reduced salt, removed trans fats, and added more nutritious options to their menus. Consumer demand and government pressure both played a role in those changes.
The power of consumer choice is real. When enough people demand healthier options, companies respond. That is why education and awareness are so important. An informed consumer is a powerful force for change.
Completely agree. A combination of consumer pressure, smart regulation, and corporate responsibility is the best path forward. Not just taxation alone.
Well said. All right, let's move on to topic 7. Is technology making us less social? This one hits close to home for many of us. Maya, since you are arguing against the topic, you must believe technology is making us more social, not less.
That is right. I believe technology has made us more connected than ever before. Think about all the ways technology helps us communicate. Video calls allow us to see family members who live far away. Social media helps us stay in touch with old friends. Online communities connect people who share the same interests but who might never meet in person. Technology has expanded our social world, not shrunk it.
I disagree. Yes, technology connects us digitally. But it is disconnecting us in real life. Think about families at dinner, all looking at their phones instead of talking to each other. Think about people at parties, texting instead of talking to the people next to them. Technology has created a lot of shallow connections. We have hundreds of online friends but sometimes feel very lonely in real life. That is a problem.
But Alex, the loneliness you are describing is a complex problem. It is not just about technology. People have always felt lonely. And for many people, technology actually helps with loneliness. Someone who is shy or has social anxiety might find it much easier to connect online first, and then build real friendships from those online connections.
That is true for some people. But for many others, especially young people, spending time on social media has replaced spending real time with friends. Studies show that teenagers today spend less time in person with their friends than teenagers did 20 years ago. That cannot be good for their social development. Real, in-person connection is different from online connection. We need both, but we are losing the balance.
I agree that balance is important. But the solution is not to reject technology. It is to use it wisely. We can set limits on screen time. We can make rules for ourselves, like no phones at the dinner table. Technology is a tool. The problem is how we use it, not the technology itself.
That is a good point. Technology itself is neutral. But the companies that build these apps design them to be addictive. They want us to spend as much time as possible on their platforms. So it is hard to use them wisely when they are specifically designed to pull us in. We need better regulation of these companies, not just personal willpower.
I agree with that completely. Tech companies have a responsibility to design healthier products. Let's debate topic 8 now. Should university education be free for everyone?
Yes, I strongly believe that university should be free. Education is the key to opportunity. If university is expensive, only wealthy people can afford to go. This creates a society where your future depends not on your intelligence or hard work, but on your family's money. That is deeply unfair. When university is free, everyone has an equal chance to develop their talents and contribute to society.
I understand the ideal, Alex. But free university education is very expensive. Someone has to pay for it. If the government pays, that means higher taxes for everyone. And many of the people who benefit most from university education go on to earn very high salaries. Is it fair to ask a lower-income worker who never went to university to pay taxes to subsidize the education of someone who will earn much more than them?
That is a reasonable concern. But think about it this way. When more people get university degrees, society benefits as a whole. We have more doctors, engineers, teachers, and researchers. A more educated population creates a stronger economy. Higher tax revenues from educated workers can actually pay for the cost of free education over time. Many countries in Europe offer free or very cheap university education, and their economies are doing very well.
Some European countries do offer free university, but they also have very high taxes and sometimes smaller systems than countries like the United States. Scaling that model to a large, diverse country is very challenging. And there is another concern. If university is free, will more people attend even if they are not ready or motivated? Will the quality go down?
Those are valid questions. Free university does not mean low-quality university. We need to invest in quality at the same time. And some students who would not have gone to university because of cost might turn out to be great students when given the chance. We should not assume that motivation is only for students whose families can already afford education.
I think a better solution might be a sliding scale. Students from lower-income families pay little or nothing. Students from wealthier families pay more. This makes education accessible without putting all the cost on taxpayers. It is more targeted and more fair.
That is already the system in some places, and it is a good start. But I still believe we should work toward fully free education as a long-term goal. Education is a human right.
And I believe quality affordable education is a human right. But the way to get there requires careful planning. Topic 9 is our final debate today. Should people eat less meat to protect the environment?
This is one of the most important environmental issues of our time. I strongly believe that people should eat significantly less meat. The meat industry is one of the biggest sources of greenhouse gas emissions in the world. Raising animals for food uses enormous amounts of land, water, and energy. And forests, including the Amazon rainforest, are being cut down to create land for cattle. If we all ate less meat, we would dramatically reduce our impact on the environment.
I agree that the environmental impact of meat production is a serious problem. But I think the solution is more complicated than just telling people to eat less meat. Food is deeply cultural. For many people around the world, meat is part of their cultural identity, their family traditions, and their celebrations. Telling people they must change what they eat feels like an attack on their culture and their choices.
I respect cultural traditions, Maya. But the reality is that we cannot continue on our current path. Climate change is threatening everyone's future. Changing our diets is one of the most powerful individual actions we can take. And plant-based foods are becoming more delicious and more affordable every year. It is getting easier and easier to eat less meat without giving up the flavors we love.
You are right that plant-based options are improving. But access is not equal. For many people, especially in lower-income communities, fresh vegetables and plant-based alternatives are more expensive than meat. Asking people to eat less meat without making healthy plant-based food affordable and accessible is unfair.
That is absolutely true. We need to change our food systems, not just individuals' choices. Governments should support sustainable agriculture and make plant-based food more affordable. But individuals can also make a difference. Even reducing meat consumption by half would have a huge impact. You do not have to become fully vegetarian to help.
I agree with that. Small changes by many people add up. But I also think we should focus on changing industrial farming practices, not just individual diets. Most of the environmental damage comes from large-scale industrial meat production. If we regulate that more strictly, we can reduce the impact without telling individuals what they can and cannot eat.
Both approaches are needed. Better regulation and individual choices working together. I think we can agree on that.
Wonderful. Let's keep going. We have more topics to explore. Topic 10. Should homework be given to school students?
I believe homework has real value. When students practice at home, they remember lessons better. Homework helps students develop responsibility and time management. These are important skills for adult life. Studies show that students who do regular homework perform better on tests. And homework gives parents a way to see what their children are learning in school.
I disagree with giving a lot of homework, especially to young children. Children already spend 6 or 7 hours at school every day. They need time to rest, to play, and to spend time with family. Too much homework causes stress and takes away the joy of childhood. In countries like Finland, which has very little homework, students actually score very high on international education tests. Less homework, better results.
Finland is a wonderful example, but it is also a country with many other advantages, including excellent teachers and a strong culture of reading at home. We cannot compare Finland directly to every other country. In places where students have less support at home, homework helps ensure they practice what they learn, even without the help of a tutor.
That is a fair point about different contexts. But here is something important. Homework often benefits children from privileged families more than children from poor families. Wealthy children have a quiet place to study, parents who can help them, and access to books and the internet. Poor children may have none of these things. So homework can actually increase inequality.
You are absolutely right that homework can be unfair if support is not equal. That is why the quality of homework matters more than the quantity. Brief, focused homework that students can do independently is much better than long, complex projects that require parental help or extra resources.
I can accept that. Short, simple, independent practice can reinforce what students learned in class. But projects that take many hours or require materials the family cannot afford should be reduced or eliminated. The goal of homework should be learning, not stress.
Completely agree. And teachers should think carefully about what homework they assign. Does this homework actually help students learn? Or is it just busy work that keeps them occupied? Every assignment should have a clear learning purpose.
And students should have a voice too. When students feel that homework is meaningful and relevant, they are more motivated to do it. When they feel it is pointless, they lose interest. Engaging students in discussions about why certain practice is helpful can make a big difference.
Good point. Motivation is everything in learning. Homework that students see as meaningful will benefit them much more than homework they do just because they have to.
Let's keep the energy going. Topic 11. Is space exploration worth the money?
I strongly believe that space exploration is worth every penny. First, space exploration has given us incredible technology. GPS, satellite communication, weather forecasting, medical scanning technology, and many other inventions came from space research. When we invest in space, we benefit on Earth too.
I understand that space research has given us useful technology. But I have to ask, could we have developed those technologies without spending billions on rockets and space stations? Maybe the money could have been better spent on more direct solutions to Earth's problems, like ending poverty, fighting disease, or addressing climate change.
But Maya, science does not always work in a straight line. When scientists try to solve the challenges of space travel, they often discover unexpected solutions to problems on Earth. The process of exploring the unknown is unpredictable by nature. And addressing climate change actually requires space technology. Satellites monitor the health of our forests, our oceans, and our atmosphere. Space and Earth are more connected than people realize.
You make a good point about satellites. Environmental monitoring from space is genuinely valuable. But do we need to send humans to Mars to get that benefit? Most of the practical benefits of space exploration come from satellites and robotic missions. Human space travel, which costs much more, is harder to justify from a purely practical standpoint.
Human space exploration is not just about practical benefits. It inspires people. When astronauts go to space, children around the world want to become scientists and engineers. That inspiration drives innovation in every field. Also, the survival of our species in the long term may depend on becoming a multiplanetary civilization. If something catastrophic happens on Earth, having humans on other planets is our backup plan.
The long-term survival argument is interesting, but it assumes we can actually live on another planet. Mars has no breathable air, extreme temperatures, and high radiation. Making it livable would cost trillions of dollars and take many decades. In the meantime, billions of people on Earth are suffering from problems we could solve right now with existing technology and money.
That is a tension that is very real. Short-term needs versus long-term preparation. I think the answer is not to choose one or the other, but to invest wisely in both. A small percentage of government spending on space exploration is not going to solve or prevent us from solving poverty or climate change. But it can give us tools and inspiration that contribute to all of those goals.
I think I can agree that a balanced approach makes sense. Space exploration should not be the top priority when so many immediate problems need solving. But cutting it entirely would also be a mistake.
Exactly. Balance is the key word. Topic 12. Should voting be mandatory for all citizens?
Oh, this is a fascinating question about democracy itself. Alex, you support mandatory voting. Make your argument.
Yes, I do. In most democracies, only about half of eligible voters actually vote in elections. That means governments are elected by a minority of the population. Important decisions are made by leaders who do not truly represent everyone. If voting were mandatory, all voices would be counted. The results would better represent the whole population, not just the most motivated or politically engaged citizens.
But making voting mandatory raises a serious question about freedom. In a democracy, the freedom to choose includes the freedom not to choose. If I do not like any of the candidates, or if I believe that voting changes nothing, forcing me to vote feels like a violation of my rights. People should have the right to abstain.
Mandatory voting does not mean you must vote for a specific candidate. In countries like Australia, where voting is mandatory, you can always submit a blank ballot or vote informally. You just have to show up. And that is a small thing to ask in exchange for the benefits of a healthier democracy.
Australia is an interesting example. They have mandatory voting and it seems to work well for them. But Australia also has a culture that accepts this system. In other countries, especially those with strong traditions of individual freedom like the United States, mandatory voting would likely face strong resistance and might even be seen as unconstitutional.
Cultural acceptance is important. Any major change in voting laws would need to be introduced carefully, with strong public education about why it matters. But the principle is sound. A democracy works better when more people participate. If making voting mandatory encourages participation, that is good for everyone.
What about people who have very little knowledge about politics or the candidates? If we force everyone to vote, we might get a lot of random or uninformed votes. That could actually lead to worse outcomes.
That concern, often called the argument against compulsory voting, assumes that only well-informed people should vote. But that is a dangerous idea in a democracy. Everyone is affected by government decisions. Everyone has a right to have a say. And research shows that in countries with mandatory voting, people are actually more interested in politics because they know their vote counts.
You have made me think more carefully about this. I still worry about forcing people to participate. But I agree that low voter turnout is a serious problem. Perhaps instead of mandatory voting, we should focus on making voting easier. Automatic voter registration, voting on weekends, online voting. Remove the barriers and more people will choose to vote.
Removing barriers is absolutely essential. And if those changes dramatically increase turnout, maybe mandatory voting would become unnecessary. I support all of those reforms. But I still think mandatory voting is a powerful tool for true democratic representation.
Topic 13. Should the minimum wage be increased significantly?
Yes, I believe the minimum wage should be raised to a level where workers can actually live with dignity. In many countries, the minimum wage is so low that even people who work full-time cannot afford basic necessities like housing, food, and healthcare. That is simply not right. No one who works hard should live in poverty.
I share the goal of ending poverty wages, Alex. But raising the minimum wage significantly worries many economists. When you force businesses to pay more, some businesses, especially small ones, may not be able to afford it. They may cut jobs, reduce hours, or even close entirely. The workers you want to help could end up losing their jobs.
That concern is understandable, but the evidence is more complicated. Many cities and states that have raised their minimum wages significantly have not seen the massive job losses that economists predicted. In fact, higher wages can stimulate the local economy because low-income workers spend almost all of their income locally. More spending means more business activity.
Some places have had positive results, that is true. But other places have seen negative effects, particularly for small businesses. A restaurant in a big city can absorb a wage increase more easily than a small family business in a rural area. A one-size-fits-all national minimum wage may be too blunt an instrument.
That is why many economists suggest a regional minimum wage approach. Higher minimum wages in expensive cities and lower ones in areas with lower living costs. That way, the minimum wage reflects local economic conditions. But everywhere, the wage should be high enough for people to live on.
A living wage that varies by region sounds like a reasonable compromise. And there should also be regular reviews and increases to keep up with inflation. A minimum wage that is set once and then left unchanged for years quickly becomes inadequate.
Absolutely. The minimum wage should be tied to inflation or to the cost of living in each area. Automatic increases remove the political battles that often delay necessary raises. Workers should not have to fight for a raise every few years just to maintain the same buying power.
I agree. The details of how to implement a fair minimum wage are complex. But the principle that all working people deserve to earn enough to live is one I share completely.
Topic 14. Is online learning better than classroom learning?
This is a very relevant topic, especially since the pandemic made online learning normal for millions of students. Alex, you think online learning has advantages? Tell us why.
Online learning offers incredible flexibility. Students can learn from anywhere in the world. They can study at their own pace. If they need to replay a lesson, they can. If they understand something quickly, they can move on. This personalizes education in a way that a traditional classroom cannot. And online education is often much cheaper. It makes learning accessible to people who cannot attend a physical school.
I agree that online learning has real advantages. But it also has significant disadvantages. Social interaction is a fundamental part of education. When children learn together in a classroom, they develop communication skills, teamwork, and friendships. Online learning often feels isolated. Many students report feeling lonely and disconnected when they study online.
That is true for children especially. But for adult learners, online learning often works very well. Many adults have busy lives and cannot attend regular classes. Online learning allows them to study while working and caring for families.
And modern online platforms include discussion forums, group projects, and live video classes.
The social element does not have to be completely absent.
Those online social features help. But they are not the same as being physically present with your classmates and teacher. A teacher in a classroom can immediately see if a student is confused or struggling. They can adjust their teaching in real time. Online, that kind of immediate, personal response is much harder.
Technology is improving that, though. Artificial intelligence tools can now track student progress in real time and alert teachers when a student is struggling. And many online programs combine online study with occasional in-person sessions. This blended approach gets the best of both worlds.
The blended model is one I actually find quite promising. Use online learning for content delivery and independent practice. Use classroom time for discussion, collaboration, and hands-on activities. That combination could be more effective than either approach alone.
I completely agree. The future of education is probably not fully online or fully in person.
It is a thoughtful blend that uses each approach where it works best.
And of course, access to technology is a major issue. Online learning only works if students have a device and a reliable internet connection. In many parts of the world and even in poor communities in wealthy countries, students lack these basic tools. Online learning could increase inequality if we do not address the digital divide.
The digital divide is one of the most urgent challenges in education today.
Expanding internet access and providing devices to students who need them should be a priority for governments. Education technology is a powerful tool, but only if everyone can use it.
Very well said. Topic 15. Should the death penalty be abolished everywhere?
I believe the death penalty should be abolished in all countries.
The most important reason is the risk of executing innocent people.
Studies in the United States have found that a significant number of people on death row were later found to be innocent.
Executing an innocent person is an irreversible and terrible injustice. No justice system is perfect, and when human lives are at stake, we cannot accept that risk.
The risk of executing innocent people is a very serious concern. I agree that any justice system must do everything possible to avoid convicting innocent people. But some people argue that for the very worst crimes, like mass murder or terrorism, the death penalty is a necessary and just punishment. The families of victims sometimes feel that only the death penalty provides true justice.
I deeply respect the pain of victims' families. But research shows that the death penalty does not make society safer.
It does not reduce murder rates. Countries that have abolished the death penalty do not have higher murder rates than those that keep it. So the death penalty is not an effective deterrent.
And revenge, while understandable as a human emotion, should not be the basis of a justice system.
You are right that the evidence for the death penalty as a deterrent is weak. But there is another argument. Some crimes are so horrific that the person who committed them has permanently lost their right to live in society. Keeping them alive in prison for decades costs taxpayers enormous amounts of money. Some people believe that execution is simply more proportionate justice for certain extreme crimes.
That cost argument is actually wrong, interestingly. In the United States, executing a prisoner costs more than keeping them in prison for life.
The lengthy appeals process, the special death row facilities, and the legal costs all add up.
Life imprisonment without parole is actually cheaper.
And it has the advantage that if new evidence emerges, the person can still be freed.
That is a fact that surprises many people. I did not know that the death penalty is more expensive than life imprisonment. That certainly weakens the cost argument against abolition. I think the most honest position I can take is this. I am deeply uncomfortable with the death penalty because of the risk of executing innocent people. But I understand why some people see it as just for the worst crimes.
And that discomfort with the risk of irreversible error is exactly why so many countries have abolished it. 106 countries have now abolished the death penalty.
That is a clear global trend.
And I believe that trend will continue as more people understand the evidence.
Before we wrap up, I want to discuss one more topic briefly. Topic 16. Should gambling be made illegal?
I believe gambling should be legal but heavily regulated.
Banning gambling does not make it disappear. It just drives it underground.
People will still gamble, but without any protections. Legal, regulated gambling can include safeguards like spending limits, self-exclusion programs for addicted players, and funding for addiction treatment. Banning it removes all of those protections.
But gambling causes serious harm to families and individuals. Gambling addiction is a recognized mental health condition. People lose their homes, their savings, and their relationships because of gambling. Casinos and betting companies make enormous profits from people at their most vulnerable. Is that really a business we should allow?
Every business that sells pleasurable products, from alcohol to video games, carries some risk of addiction for vulnerable people.
The answer is not prohibition.
Prohibition of alcohol in the United States in the 1920s was a famous failure.
It created organized crime and did not stop people from drinking.
The same would happen with gambling. Better to regulate it and use the tax revenue to fund addiction services.
The comparison to alcohol prohibition is a strong one. It is true that banning something people want rarely works completely. But gambling is uniquely designed to create addiction. The games are engineered to keep people playing and spending. The odds always favor the house. At least with alcohol, you can drink socially and stop. With gambling, the mechanisms of addiction are built into the activity itself.
That is a powerful argument.
And I agree that gambling companies should not be allowed to use manipulative design to encourage problem gambling. Stricter regulations on advertising, game design, and accessibility are needed.
For example, gambling should not be easily accessible on smartphones at any hour of the day or night.
That kind of accessibility increases problem gambling significantly.
I can agree with that. The regulation of online and mobile gambling needs to be much stricter. And gambling companies should be required to contribute substantially to addiction treatment programs. They profit from addiction, so they should help fund the solution.
Agreed.
Legal, strictly regulated, and with strong addiction support services.
That is the responsible approach to gambling.
Topic 17. Should social media companies be responsible for the mental health of their users?
Yes, I believe social media companies have a responsibility to protect the mental health of their users, especially young people. These companies design their platforms to be as addictive as possible. They use algorithms that feed people content that makes them feel bad about themselves. Studies link heavy social media use to increased rates of anxiety, depression, and loneliness, especially among teenagers. The companies know this and continue anyway.
I think we all feel uncomfortable with the idea that powerful corporations are profiting from algorithms that harm teenagers. But I want to ask where responsibility truly lies. Parents, schools, and individual users also have a role to play. If we hold companies solely responsible for how people use their products, we risk removing personal responsibility entirely. That is a dangerous path.
Personal responsibility matters, absolutely.
But there is a big difference between an adult who consciously chooses to spend too much time on social media and a 12-year-old whose developing brain is being manipulated by an algorithm specifically designed to maximize engagement, regardless of the emotional cost. Children cannot be expected to resist systems that adults with degrees in behavioral psychology have carefully engineered to be irresistible.
That distinction between adults and children is important. For children, I agree that companies should have much stricter obligations. Age verification, time limits, restrictions on certain types of content. But for adults, I believe companies should be required to provide clear warnings and tools for users who want to limit their usage, without being held legally liable for every negative outcome.
Warning labels and optional tools are a start.
But they are not enough on their own. Research shows that most people do not use optional tools even when they are available. This is similar to the situation with tobacco. For decades, tobacco companies said people should just choose not to smoke. Eventually, governments decided that was not good enough and implemented regulations, advertising bans, and ultimately legal accountability. Social media may need a similar evolution.
The tobacco comparison is illuminating. We did eventually hold tobacco companies responsible for knowingly selling an addictive, harmful product. If it can be proven that social media companies knowingly used addictive design features that harmed users, the legal argument for liability becomes much stronger. The key word is knowingly. Did they know their products caused harm?
Internal documents from major social media companies have shown that yes, they knew. Their own researchers identified the harms and reported them to executives. The companies chose to prioritize engagement over well-being. That knowledge changes the moral and potentially legal picture significantly.
That is deeply troubling. If companies had evidence of harm and chose to ignore it, that is a very different situation from a company that simply failed to anticipate negative outcomes. Accountability in that case seems justified. At minimum, there should be mandatory transparency. Companies should be required to share their research on user mental health with independent researchers and regulators.
Transparency is essential. And the platforms should also give users much more control. Instead of algorithms optimized for engagement, users should be able to choose chronological feeds, set their own time limits, and easily understand why they are being shown specific content. The default settings should protect users, not maximize the company's profit.
I can support all of those reforms. And parents should have real tools to monitor and limit their children's social media use without having to be technology experts. Making child safety the default, not an optional feature, is a reasonable expectation.
Completely agreed. Companies have built enormously powerful tools. With that power comes responsibility. The question is not whether they should have any responsibility, but how much and what kind.
Topic 18. Should countries accept more refugees and asylum seekers?
I believe wealthy countries have both a moral and a legal obligation to accept refugees. The 1951 Refugee Convention, signed by most countries in the world, establishes the right of people to seek asylum when fleeing persecution. Refugees are not economic migrants making an optional choice. They are people escaping war, torture, or severe oppression. Turning them away puts their lives at risk.
I deeply respect the human rights argument. And I believe every person who faces genuine persecution deserves protection. But the practical challenges of accepting large numbers of refugees are real. Housing, healthcare, schools, and jobs for incoming refugees require significant resources. In some communities, these pressures cause tension and resentment. Governments have to balance compassion with capacity.
The tension and resentment you mention often comes from poor management, not from the refugees themselves. When refugees are given the right to work, language classes, and genuine integration support, they contribute to their new communities and economies. Studies consistently show that immigration, including refugee resettlement, has a net positive economic impact in the long run.
The long-run benefit is real, but the short-run costs and challenges are what people actually experience day to day. Communities near refugee reception centers often feel overwhelmed without adequate government support. The solution is not to take fewer refugees, necessarily. It is to properly fund the services and integration programs that make welcoming refugees sustainable.
Exactly right. The problem is usually not the refugees. The problem is inadequate funding for the systems that support them. In fact, cutting refugee intake saves very little money compared to the cost of properly funding schools, housing, and social services for the existing population. The politicians who blame refugees for underfunded services are usually the same politicians who cut those services.
That is a sharp political observation. And it points to how refugee issues are often used as scapegoats for deeper problems like housing shortages, underfunded public services, and wage stagnation. These problems existed before large refugee arrivals and would persist even if all refugees were turned away.
Right. And it is worth remembering where refugees come from. Many of the countries producing the most refugees today are in that situation partly because of the policies of wealthy nations.
Wars, economic sanctions, climate change driven partly by industrialization in rich countries.
Wealthy countries have contributed to the conditions causing displacement. That increases their moral responsibility to provide refuge.
The connection between the foreign policies of wealthy nations and refugee crises is real and under-acknowledged. It is easy to see refugees as a problem arriving from elsewhere. It is harder but more honest to recognize the ways in which rich countries have contributed to the conditions that create refugees in the first place.
And the final point I want to make is this. Refugees are not just recipients of charity. They are human beings with skills, intelligence, creativity, and determination. Many of the world's most successful entrepreneurs, scientists, artists, and leaders were once refugees or children of refugees. Welcoming refugees is not just compassionate. It is an investment in human potential.
That is a powerful reminder. The history of human civilization is a history of people moving in search of safety and opportunity. Restricting that movement entirely would not only be cruel. It would also impoverish the societies that close their doors.
Topic 19. Should school start times be changed to allow teenagers to sleep later?
Oh, I like this topic because I think the science is very clear. Alex, you argue in favor of later school start times. Go ahead.
The evidence is overwhelming. Adolescent biology changes during puberty. Teenagers naturally fall asleep later and wake up later than children or adults. This is not laziness. It is driven by shifts in melatonin production in the teenage brain. When schools start at 7 or 8 in the morning, teenagers are forced to wake at biologically unnatural times. This results in chronic sleep deprivation, which harms memory, concentration, emotional regulation, and physical health.
The biology is real, I agree with that. But schools start early for practical reasons. Parents need to drop children off before work. After-school sports and activities are scheduled around early start times. The buses run on set schedules. Changing start times would require a significant reorganization of family routines, after-school programs, and transportation systems. That is not a small thing.
The logistical challenges are real but solvable. In the United States, several school districts have shifted to later start times and reported significant benefits. Test scores improved. Absenteeism decreased. Teen car accident rates went down because tired teenagers are more dangerous drivers. Mental health referrals decreased. The data is consistent. And the logistical problems were solved, though it took effort and coordination.
If the outcomes are that strong, the effort may be worth it. But what about younger children? If high schools start later, elementary schools might start earlier to allow buses to make multiple trips. Young children, who naturally wake early, would then be going to school when they are most alert. But their older siblings might benefit from sleeping in. Maybe later start times for secondary schools is the right answer.
That is actually the approach that most research supports. Middle and high schools should start later, while elementary schools can maintain earlier times. Young children naturally wake early.
Teenagers naturally wake late.
Aligning school schedules with these biological realities makes the school day more productive for everyone.
The idea that we should design institutions around human biology, rather than forcing humans to adapt to institutional convenience, is one I find very appealing. We would not expect all adults to work night shifts because it suits the organization. Why do we expect teenagers to function effectively at hours that work against their biology?
Exactly. And chronic sleep deprivation in adolescence has long-term health consequences. It is linked to higher rates of obesity, diabetes, and depression. We spend billions on healthcare. Changing school start times is a relatively low-cost intervention that could have a significant impact on adolescent health.
The cost-benefit here seems clear. The main barrier is inertia. People are used to the current schedule. Changing it requires coordination and disrupts established routines. But that disruption is temporary, and the benefits are lasting. I would support pilot programs in different school districts to gather local data and build the case for wider adoption.
Pilot programs are an excellent approach.
Start small, measure the results, build the evidence base, and then expand.
Change is easier when people can see it working nearby.
And we should involve students themselves in these conversations. Teenagers are the ones most affected by school start times, and they are more than capable of contributing meaningfully to discussions about their own education and health.
Absolutely. Student voice matters.
When young people feel heard and involved, they are more engaged with their schools and communities.
Topic 20. Should genetic testing be used to predict or prevent future diseases?
I believe genetic testing has enormous potential to improve human health and save lives.
Knowing your genetic risk for certain diseases allows you to take preventive action early.
If you know you carry a gene that significantly increases your risk of breast cancer or Alzheimer's disease, you can make lifestyle changes, get more frequent screenings, or even take preventive medication. Knowledge is power, especially when it comes to health.
The potential benefits are real. But genetic testing also raises serious concerns about privacy and discrimination. If an employer or insurance company learns about your genetic risk profile, could they use that information against you? Could you be denied a job or refused insurance because of a risk factor you were born with, through no fault of your own?
That concern is exactly why strong legal protections are needed alongside genetic testing.
In the United States, the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act already prohibits employers and health insurers from discriminating based on genetic information.
Other countries have similar laws. The solution is not to avoid genetic testing but to ensure robust protections are in place.
Laws can be strengthened or weakened over time, and enforcement varies widely. But let me raise a different concern. Genetic testing is not perfect. Most genetic tests tell you about risk, not certainty. If your test shows an elevated risk for heart disease, you may spend years worrying about a disease you might never develop. Psychological harm from inaccurate or misunderstood genetic information can be significant.
You are right that communication and education are critical. Genetic testing should always be accompanied by genetic counseling. People need help interpreting their results accurately.
A slightly elevated risk for a common disease is very different from carrying a gene mutation that almost guarantees a particular outcome. Without proper counseling, people can easily misunderstand or overreact to their results.
Genetic counselors are in short supply in many countries. If genetic testing becomes widespread without sufficient counseling resources, we could create a crisis of anxiety and misunderstanding. Also, what about when parents test children for diseases that only appear in adulthood? Children cannot consent, and the knowledge could affect how parents treat them throughout childhood.
The question of testing children is genuinely complex.
For childhood diseases that can be prevented or treated, early genetic knowledge is clearly beneficial.
For adult-onset conditions where no early intervention exists, testing children before they can consent raises serious ethical questions. Guidelines should restrict predictive testing of children to cases where there is a clear medical benefit in childhood.
That seems like a reasonable principle. Test children when early knowledge leads to better outcomes. Wait until adulthood for conditions where no childhood intervention is possible, so that individuals can make their own informed choice about whether they want to know.
And for the wider population, making genetic testing more accessible and affordable, while investing in the counseling infrastructure to support it, could genuinely transform preventive medicine. We spend enormous resources treating diseases after they have developed. Preventing them from developing in the first place is far better for patients and far cheaper for health systems.
Preventive medicine is one area where investment almost always pays off. And genetic insights could help us design more personalized preventive strategies rather than giving everyone the same general health advice. The future of medicine is genuinely personalized, and genetic testing is a key part of making that possible.
The potential is extraordinary. The key is ensuring it develops with proper ethical safeguards, legal protections, equal access, and the educational and counseling support to help people make sense of what their genes can and cannot tell them.
Before we wrap up our debates, let us discuss one more question. Topic 21. Should physical education be mandatory in schools?
Yes, I believe physical education should be required for all school students, at all ages. Childhood and adolescence are the most critical periods for building healthy habits. If young people learn to enjoy physical activity at school, they are much more likely to stay active throughout their lives. Given that we are facing global epidemics of obesity, heart disease, and diabetes, instilling a love of movement from an early age is one of the most powerful public health interventions available.
The public health argument is strong. But I question whether mandatory PE classes always achieve their goal. Many adults remember compulsory physical education with discomfort or even embarrassment. Being forced to run laps or compete in sports you are not good at in front of your peers can actually create negative associations with exercise. Some students leave compulsory PE less inclined to exercise, not more.
That is a very real problem, and it comes down to how PE is taught, not whether it is taught. Traditional PE that focuses on competitive sports and embarrasses less athletic students is counterproductive. Modern PE should offer a wide variety of activities. Dance, yoga, martial arts, swimming, hiking, cycling. Students who find an activity they genuinely enjoy during PE class may continue it for life.
I agree entirely that variety is key. If PE means only football or running, many students will disengage. But if students can choose from a range of activities that match their interests and physical abilities, then mandatory PE becomes much more defensible. The goal should be joyful movement, not competitive performance.
And the benefits go beyond physical health. Regular physical activity has been shown to significantly improve academic performance. Students who exercise regularly have better concentration, stronger memory, and lower rates of anxiety and depression. Exercise is not just good for the body. It is essential for the brain.
The cognitive and mental health benefits of exercise are well established. And in schools where students sit at desks for 6 hours a day, having a physical break is important for attention and energy. Even short activity breaks throughout the day improve focus. PE does not have to be a separate hour-long class. It can be integrated into the school day in many ways.
Active learning techniques, movement breaks, walking meetings, outdoor lessons. There are many creative ways to build physical activity into the school day beyond a traditional PE class. The important thing is that schools take physical well-being as seriously as academic achievement. You cannot separate the two.
Schools increasingly recognize that. Social-emotional learning, mental health support, and physical activity are all being taken more seriously as part of a holistic approach to education. Good. The goal of school should be to develop healthy, happy, and capable human beings. Physical education is an important part of that.
Topic 22. Should all countries switch to a 4-day working week?
We have touched on this topic briefly, but let us explore it more deeply. Alex, what is your strongest argument for the 4-day workweek?
The evidence from pilot programs around the world is compelling. Companies in Iceland, Japan, the United Kingdom, and several other countries have run large-scale trials of 4-day workweeks. In almost every case, productivity either stayed the same or increased. Employees worked smarter and more efficiently during 4 days than they had during 5. And the benefits to employees were dramatic. Stress decreased, job satisfaction increased, and absenteeism dropped sharply.
The trial results are genuinely impressive. But trials involve companies that volunteer to participate. They are motivated and likely to make the experiment work. Rolling out a mandatory 4-day week to every business in a country, including ones that did not volunteer, might produce very different results.
That is why a mandatory universal switch all at once would be challenging. A better approach might be to offer strong incentives for companies to transition voluntarily, with a target timeline. Start with the public sector, where governments have direct control, and demonstrate success. Then use tax benefits and other incentives to encourage the private sector to follow.
The public sector first approach makes sense. And there is an equity issue here too. Many workers, particularly in retail, healthcare, hospitality, and manufacturing, cannot simply compress their work into fewer days. Nurses cannot skip a day at the hospital. A shop assistant cannot serve customers on an empty day. How does the 4-day week apply to workers in these sectors?
For these workers, the question becomes one of scheduling rather than simply removing a day. In healthcare, for example, many nurses already work 3 12-hour shifts, which is effectively a 3-day week. Expanding that model or introducing rotating schedules that give everyone more consistent time off, while maintaining service levels, is more complex but very achievable. The goal is more rest and recovery time for all workers, however that is structured.
I think the goal of less overwork and more rest is one almost everyone can support. Burnout is a serious problem across many professions. When people are exhausted, they make more mistakes, are less creative, and are more prone to physical and mental illness. The traditional 40-hour, 5-day week was designed for a very different economy. It makes sense to question whether it is still the best arrangement.
Exactly. And the environmental benefits are real too. Fewer commuting days means less traffic, less pollution, and less energy consumption. If millions of workers take a day out of the office, the reduction in carbon emissions could be meaningful.
The environmental argument is often underrated in discussions about working hours. The relationship between how we work and how much we damage the environment is real. Reducing unnecessary commuting and office energy use is a concrete climate benefit.
So when we add up the evidence, productivity stays constant, employee well-being improves, absenteeism drops, environmental impact decreases, and people have more time for family, community, and personal development. The case for exploring the 4-day week is very strong.
I agree that the evidence warrants serious policy consideration. The transition would need to be managed carefully, with attention to different industries, different types of work, and the needs of those who cannot simply rearrange their hours. But dismissing the idea entirely, in the face of such positive evidence, would be a mistake.
Very well said. Progress often requires questioning the arrangements we have always taken for granted. The 5-day week itself was once a radical idea. The 8-hour day was once a radical idea. Both are now seen as basic worker rights. Perhaps the 4-day week is the next step in that long journey toward a better balance between work and life.
Before we move to our summary, I want to raise one final thought about the meat debate. Food systems are very complex. When we talk about eating less meat, we need to think about farmers too. Millions of people around the world earn their living by raising animals for food. If demand for meat drops dramatically, what happens to those farmers and their families?
That is a crucial point. A transition to less meat-heavy diets needs to happen gradually and with support for farming communities. Farmers can be helped to transition to growing more crops or to raising animals in more sustainable ways. Governments should provide support and training.
And some animals actually play an important role in sustainable agriculture. Cows can graze on land that is not suitable for growing crops. Their manure fertilizes the soil. So eliminating all meat is not necessarily the most sustainable option. It is more complicated than that.
You are right. This is not a black and white issue. Reducing factory farming of animals is the priority. Small-scale, sustainable animal farming is a very different thing. We should not treat all meat production the same.
And honestly, different people in different parts of the world are in very different situations. A person living in a region where plant-based food is expensive or hard to grow has very different options than someone living in a wealthy urban area with access to many food choices.
That is the human element in all of these debates. When we talk about changing behavior, we must always ask, who are we asking to change? And is the burden of change being shared fairly?
That is a question that applies to almost every topic we debated today. Climate change, health, technology, work. The solutions need to be fair to everyone, not just to those who already have the most options.
Very well said, Maya. I think that is a perfect note to start our closing on. Okay, we have finished all 9 debate topics. Let me give a quick summary of what we discussed. We debated social media for children, zoos, the 4-day workweek, school uniforms, cars in city centers, fast food taxes, technology and social connection, free university education, and eating less meat.
In every debate, both sides had good points. That is the nature of real debates. Most important issues are complicated. There is rarely a simple right or wrong answer.
As a B1 English learner, you can use debates to improve your language in many ways. You heard phrases like I believe, I disagree, that is a fair point, I understand your concern but, and in my opinion.
These are very useful phrases for expressing your own opinions and responding to others. Try using them in your own conversations.
Another thing you might notice is that good debate is about listening, not just talking. You heard us respond to each other's points. We did not just repeat ourselves. We listened and adapted.
That is an important skill in English and in life. Good communication means really listening to what the other person says and responding thoughtfully.
We also tried to find common ground. Even when we disagreed, we looked for areas where we could agree. That makes conversation more constructive and more interesting.
Real debates are not about winning or losing. They are about exploring ideas from different angles and developing your own thinking.
We hope this debate practice has been helpful for your English listening skills. And maybe it has also given you something to think about on these important topics.
Try this at home. Pick one of today's topics. Argue for one side. Then argue for the other side. See which arguments you find most convincing.
This kind of exercise will help you think more clearly in English and help you understand different points of view.
Thank you so much for listening today. We really enjoyed having this conversation.
We will see you next week for more English practice. Keep working hard. You are doing great.
Stay curious, stay open-minded, and keep listening. Goodbye for now.
Goodbye, everyone. See you next time.